Okay, you're letting people in?
Yes, I am. I'm letting people in, and I'm starting the recording. If you could just give me a few minutes while I also get the live streaming going as well.
Okay, and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, and I have one other thing to admit, because I'm having some screen issues. I won't be able to put that flag up for you this time around.
That's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Looks like everyone's in the meeting. We are streaming, and thank you, George. I figured you would jump in and support me there.
Okay, we're going to call the regular meeting to order. So sorry we're a little late. We're coming out of closed session, and we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag.
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. May we have the roll call, please, Anthony?
Yes, Councilmember Hawkins Manuelian,
Here.
Councilmember DeGolia,
Yes, I'm here.
Widmer,
Yes, I'm here.
Vice Mayor Lempres,
Present?
and Mayor Lewis.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Now's the time for public comments. Anthony, why don't you explain how public comments can be made at this point, please?
Madam Mayor, before you go there, you have a report out of closed session.
Oh, you're right. I just whizzed right by that. Mona.
Thank you, Mayor Lewis. The council did meet in closed session. No action was taken.
Okay. Public comments, Anthony?
Thank you, Mayor Lewis. As Mayor Lewis mentioned, if you'd like to make a public comment, you're able to do so by using a few options that are available to you. You can look at the bottom toolbar on your Zoom window screen where it says participants, and you can click that to raise your hand. I will give you the option to unmute yourself at that time. You also can send a chat message to me directly in the chat feature. You may also use a text and send me a text. I'm going to post the text number that's available to you in the chat window now. And if you'd like to make a public comment, now would be the time, and the mayor will also make opportunities to do that throughout the meeting during various items. And at this time, Mayor, I see no hands raised, and I have no one that indicated that ahead of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. So we will move on to item number 5, City Manager's written report. George?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You have the written report as part of your agenda packet. Staff's present here this evening to answer any questions the council may have. During my one-on-one meetings with each individual council member, there were no significant Q&A items on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any member of the council have a question or comment for George on the manager's written report? Seeing none, we'll move on to our consent calendar. Our consent calendar are items that are routine in nature and generally considered in one motion and adopted by a single vote of the City Council. There are items number 6 through 14. If there is a discussion regarding a consent calendar item is desired, the member or members of the City Council, public and or staff wishing to pull the items should do so and indicate at the time the mayor calls for consideration of this item. Are there any members of the council who wish to pull or question a consent item number 6 through 14?
The question, Mayor.
I see. Vice Mayor?
Just on item 10, the council committee assignments, we had those 3 that dropped off. I assume they're in part of this motion, correct?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Anthony?
They are.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, they've been included for the public record, and council's aware of those 3 ad hoc committees.
Okay. Then Councilmember Widmer, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, on your question, Mike, the letter from Anthony came out, about an hour and 2 hours ago, so it is attached. I just have a comment on item number 11, which was the audit report. I can make that now, or I could wait until we're done.
Well, go ahead. What's your comment?
Well, okay, I discussed this with George. You know, we do have all these off-balance sheet liabilities, and we have some real liabilities, as you know. And I just want to bring it to everybody's attention that we're close to approaching $30 million. And so that's something we need to keep an eye on, and maybe as we move forward in the future, that we consider making additional payments into at least our OPEB, and be very, very careful and watchful of what PERS is doing, because that number is growing as well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, any other member of the city council want to make a comment on items 6 through 14? Seeing none, I'll open up to the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment or pull an item on the consent calendar on items 6 through 14? Anthony?
And I have none.
Okay. Seeing no public comments, may I get a motion to approve the consent calendar items number 6 through 14?
Yeah, I move that
Councilmember Member,
I move that we approve the consent calendar as is.
do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. DeGolia. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? I think we have a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Hawkins Van Willian,
Aye.
Councilmember DeGolia,
Aye.
Widmer,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lemprus,
Aye.
and Mayor Lewis.
Yes, aye. That motion carries. We move on to our regular agenda, public meeting. Item number 15, which is our introduction of the first reading of the ordinance amending Atherton Municipal Code, Chapter 8.616, noise pertaining to leaf blowers. And I think that, do we have Stephanie Davis to present?
Good evening, Mayor. Lisa Costa-Sanders. I'll be presenting the item this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you. All right, so Anthony, I think you have the presentation. If you want to go ahead and pull that up, and I'll get started. The item before you is introduction of an amendment to Atherton Municipal Code, Chapter 8.16, noise pertaining to leaf blowers.
One moment here.
Great, and you could just go to the next slide. Thank you. The town's current municipal code regulations regulates hours for the operation of power garden equipment, and that includes leaf blowers. It does not regulate the type of leaf blower that can be utilized. Next slide. Just to review the background on this item. Thank you. The topic of regulating leaf blowers has been discussed by the Environmental Programs Committee and the City Council over the last 2 years. Most recently at your November City Council meeting, the Council conducted a public hearing and provided direction to staff for revisions to the ordinance, as well as a few additional research items. Next. The Council was supportive of a possible ban on gas and leaf blowers to some capacity and shift to electric leaf blowers over a period of time in the future, but not right now. Next slide, Anthony. The Council members provided some common ground principles for an ordinance revision, and those include prohibiting use of leaf blowers on designated spare the air days, restrict the allowable hours for the use of leaf blowers, and as noted above, no restrictions at this time relating to the use of gas-powered leaf blowers. Next slide. So based on that direction, staff has prepared ordinance revisions for your consideration. And that would restrict the allowed hours for use of leaf blowers as follows. Would allow leaf blower to be utilized through the hours of 8 to 5 on weekdays. And this reduces the allowed hours by 1 hour, as the code currently permits up to 6 p.m. Reduce the hours on Saturday from 10 to 3, which reduces by 2 hours, as currently allowed to 5 p.m. on Saturday. Prohibit the use of leaf blowers on Sundays, is currently allowed from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., as well as prohibit the use on spare the air days and on holidays. And those two different categories are not currently regulated. The ordinance also adds purpose and intent statements, definitions, and responsibility section to better clarify the applicable and the goals of the ordinance. And as previously stated, the ordinance does not restrict the type of leaf blower that can be operated in the town. Next slide. The council also, at the last meeting in November, requested additional information on the cost of leaf blowers, the average amount of time a landscaper spends using leaf blowers during landscape maintenance, as well as options for a town pilot program. And I'll review those items now. Next. So we did some research on the cost of gas versus electric leaf blowers and found gas blowers range from $339 to $648 per unit. And electric blowers, and that includes one replacement battery for each unit, varied in price from $318 to $1,780 per unit. Next. We also spoke with residential landscapers, and we surveyed them to see how much time they spend utilizing leaf blowers on residential properties. And it averaged out about 30 to 60 minutes per property. And you'll note that time does increase during the fall and winter months when there's a lot more landscaping debris. For municipal operations, the town spends, noted through November and December, about 140 hours a month, which is an increase from the months of August through October, which averaged closer to 60 hours a month. We also checked with the Circus Club, Menlo Schools, Sacred Heart Schools. They indicate that they use it every day and the length of time varies. And Menlo College reported utilizing leaf blowers 3 to 4 days per week or as needed for about 24 hours a week. Next slide. We've also considered the scope and cost to implement a temporary town-sponsored pilot program, which would include the purchase and use of a battery-operated electric leaf blower for existing municipal operations, both at the park and public streets. The pilot program would evaluate the effectiveness of battery-operated leaf blowers for general municipal use, including the ease of use, noise, effectiveness, comparative time per task, the battery operating, and the charge times. It's noted that batteries do drain quicker when operated above the lowest setting, and we've provided an estimated cost to purchase a leaf blower only, and it does not include the staff time to conduct the work or evaluate the pilot program. Next slide. So we're recommending that an initial pilot program include the purchase of one battery-operated backpack blower with 2 spare batteries and 2 rapid chargers. And the estimated cost to purchase the equipment would be $1,200. And staff does request council direction on this item as to whether or not to move forward with a town-piloted electric leaf blower program. Next slide. In addition, town could develop some community outreach and education program on leaf blowers. We could inform residents of any new ordinance restrictions, provide some information on the differences between gas and electric blowers, provide educational resources, and other information such as rebate programs as they become available. This community education outreach could be done in coordination with the Environmental Programs Committee. And as well on this item, staff requests council direction as to whether or not to move forward in developing public outreach and education program, and whether or not to include the support of the Environmental Programs Committee in doing so. Next item. We have received several public comments. I believe the city clerk has provided all of those comments to the council members. And there is concern that's been expressed regarding restriction on Sundays and more limited hours on Saturdays, and also some reference information from the California Air Resource Board was provided. The next item shows the recommendation to introduce the ordinance. Should you choose to do so this evening, we have that before you. I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions, as well as Robert Avadia can also answer questions relating to town operations and the pilot program. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. Very nice. A lot of good research there for us to look at. Can I bring it back to the council members? If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Lisa about her presentation. I see Councilmember DeGolia.
Yeah, Lisa, just one question. You say that your cost review included one spare battery and the recommendation was to get an electric leaf blower and 2 spare batteries. When you say spare battery, does that mean in addition to a battery that goes with the unit, or is that just one battery in the first case and 2 batteries in the second case?
Robert, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be one battery for the unit and an additional battery that could be charged while the unit is being utilized. So 2 total batteries.
No, for the municipal operations, the recommendation is to purchase 2 additional batteries.
Oh, so 3 total.
Due to the size of the park and the need to use the leaf blower out in the park and in the streets, we want to make sure that for the pilot program, we have enough capacity to manage.
So just to be clear, so you'd be purchasing 3 batteries and the unit?
The unit
Or maybe
comes with
one battery comes with the unit?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else on council have a question for staff?
Madam Mayor, I have a question if.
Yes, Vice Mayor, of
It
course.
relates to the difference between the 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines. And we talked about this last time. Lisa, would you be so kind to summarize sort of the differences between those two? And are we aware of any town anywhere that's distinguished between them through an ordinance in any way?
I'm not aware of the towns that have, or excuse me, the jurisdictions that have restricted. And Robert, I'm wondering if you're better able to answer that question. As the difference
I'll
between
do
the
what I
two.
can. I think Stephanie did most of the research and it was presented in the previous report. But as I recall, your primary difference is the fuel mixture, whether or not you are having, whether or not you're burning oil with the gas in the 2-stroke versus burning the gas only and having the oil for lubricating the engine. And so the emissions are greater in the 2-stroke than they are in the 4-stroke. The 2-stroke engines are more common, a little cheaper, and I believe, if I recall correctly, that they're more available in the low noise models.
But also lighter.
Yeah, they're more lightweight. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Okay, seeing none, I think I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment at this point. Are there any members of the public, Anthony, that would like to speak on this matter at this time? I see on the chat, just a minute, Anthony, there is a public comment from Betsy Colby having to do with the slide. She, in her comment is that the slide and documentation say the town piloted gas leaf blower, but should say town piloted electric leaf blower, right?
That's correct. That's a typo in the slide. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I
You're
thought
correct.
I saw that too, and I
Yes.
just knew that wasn't right. Thank you, Betsy. Okay, any other, Anthony, you were going to say?
I believe we have Carol Flaherty here who submitted a public comment in writing that was already shared with council and posted online for public review, but she did note that she wanted to address the council. So Ms. Flaherty, you have the floor. Be mindful of the 3-minute time.
Thank you. Due to the late timing of getting my letter, and I thought I would reiterate some of the points. So Lisa, I'd like to applaud the staff and George for really a very comprehensive analysis of the gas versus electric leaf blower issue. Nice job. So my issue tonight is not whether Atherton residents should care about our environment or our air quality or the health of our neighbors. My issue is how practical it is to ban leaf blowing on spare the air days. That's my sole issue. Weekend times, restrictions, no issue. So I decided to take a look at just how many spare the air days there were. And I was extremely surprised to find that as of December 21st, last month, there are 52 in Palo Alto. We're the same as Palo Alto. But then more importantly, how many were sequential day after day? 26. And that's where I think there is an issue, because you're asking residents and their landscapers not to use a leaf blower, potentially for a prolonged period. It may not be 26 days, it may be less than that. You know, who knows when we get to fires again next year. I just also think it's very impractical to think that these young landscapers who come to our homes, and I have 4 of them, because I have several properties in Redwood City and here. They're really young. Most don't speak English very well. I do not see them looking at an application on their cell phone in the morning to find out if it's a spare the air day and they can't blow that day. Nor do I see myself, in the absence of them taking the initiative, doing it and then calling them and saying, or walking out the door, you know, you can't blow today. I just think it's really, really impractical. And I would ask you to think about that.
Thank you, Carol.
I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your letter too. Any other members of the public, Anthony, that would like to speak? I know we had so many letters, both spanning the spectrum. A lot of great opinions from our residents.
Certainly, I know that there's at least one other member on the call who submitted a written public comment. He hasn't indicated that he'd like to make a public comment. So just as a reminder, if you'd like to make a public comment, you can raise your hand using the participants button at the bottom of your window. Send me a chat message in the chat box as well if you're joining the call. But I have no hands raised, Mayor.
Okay, all right. I'll bring it back to council for comments and to summarize our opinions about this. Who'd like to go first? Bill, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I believe the ordinance as written is a great step forward, and I thank the staff for the good work. However, I think it's still not as appropriate as I'd like to see, especially in the rights of homeowners in the particular case of Sunday usage by only the homeowner. You know, some people have Saturday commitments like children or grandchildren activities, soccer, little league, recitals, etc. That leaves only Sunday to do the work. We can restrict the time, but I do think that the Sunday activity needs to be considered. I noted that the construction on homes is permitted if the owner is doing it, and that can be very, very loud. And so I think that the same type of exemption should be offered on these blowers. I think that would be reasonable. A next question I would have, and we really haven't discussed this, is enforcement. You know, the biggest issues that enforcement faces today on weekends especially is noise and unlawful construction activities going on. I can't even calculate what the potential cost would be, especially getting started on having somebody run around to wherever somebody's using a leaf blower. Finally, I do not think that we've had enough or very substantial outreach. I've talked to several neighbors and they didn't know we were discussing this or even planning on putting something out. I know that Diana did an excellent job in sending things out to people who are on her email list. And I took the opportunity to forward it to some of those people as well, but they hadn't gotten it from Diana. So, you know, I think that a little bit more education and outreach, I think, which was suggested here, I think we've got to do that. And we've got to do that before we finalize something. So, you know, if our goal is to impact blowing during spare the air days, I think that's very admirable. As a person with asthma and other lung issues, I fully support it. But as was pointed out in Carol's letter, you know, if there's so many consecutive days, you know, we should allow something because people will just go do it then, just like they did during the pandemic shutdown when we said no construction or no yard work, and people were still doing yard work. They just pulled the trucks all the way in and shut the gates. So perhaps we should say, you know, as long as the, you know, sequence of these is not in, say, let's say 7 consecutive days or something like that. But, you know, the air quality board will send everybody an email that would say, hey, today's a spare air day. In fact, they send it the day before, so you do know it. So I think that's an admirable goal, and, you know, I support it, but I can see Carol's point. So, you know, I hope we can really move forward with the community to moving towards electric. You know, I was disappointed that we didn't have a goal of, you know, something in the future when we're planning on getting there. You know, I think it's important that we reduce the pollutants in here and the dust going into neighbors' property and things like that. So I do think that, you know, that we need to, you know, try and do something. I'd like to have a goal out there, but you know, we need more education and you know, perhaps setting a goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Councilmember DeGoya, would you like to?
Oh, I'll wait.
Okay. Vice Mayor, would you like to talk about this?
Yes, I guess. I mean, I find this frustrating. The same thing I did last time. I find this frustrating. I think it's a real issue for the town. I think the technology's not quite there yet for electric blowers or for whatever the next, you know, technological step will be. I think the town, I think we made a great effort with this, with what we've got out there. I think it seems to draw a pretty good line. I agree we shouldn't distinguish between 2- and 4-stroke engines, although I kind of wish we could, because I find that the 2-stroke engines really do raise issues, the 4-stroke don't, but I don't think that's practical. The one thing I'd like to hear always want to hear other council members' opinions. One thing I'd like to hear everyone's opinions on is the spare the air days, and whether perhaps one way of encouraging electric blowers would be to say they'd be permitted on spare the air days. What else? I think that's what I've got. I agree with Bill that this is an enforcement challenge and we should be realistic about that. I think we can still move forward from where we are, but I think it is an enforcement challenge. So that's kind of where I am on it.
Okay, thank you. Diana, would you like to jump in?
Well, this is a topic that a lot of people have talked about, and Bill had mentioned that I'd sent out a survey. I sent out a survey to the San Mateo list that supposedly includes all the voters that are registered in Atherton. It's obviously not up to date. So I think I sent out over 2,000. So it was not just to people on my mailing list. It was the mailing list provided by the San Mateo County of Atherton residents. And from that, I received about 3, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm really sorry. I thought I did, but I don't. But we had over 300 people respond. And we asked 4 simple questions about these items. I don't know if you guys want me to talk about that or not, but let me make it short of, should I talk about that or not?
Well, if you can do it. I don't think I have seen the summary. Is it?
George, did you send that out?
George's Friday
The
report.
Friday email.
Oh, okay.
Do you by chance have that, George, that you could pop on the screen? Or I don't have it at my disposal, but
I can certainly display that if the council would like.
well, it's interesting because it is not a scientific study. I want to make absolutely clear it's not, but it does give us a broader idea of how people responded. And I had over 300 some people respond to 4 questions. And additionally, I had 21 letters that were written that felt they wanted to add more input on it. And those people talked a lot about the issue of spare the air days, the issue of how long we should have for a transition, because that was originally in the wording we talked about before, is how long it takes to transition, and questions of who bears the burden. A lot of people made a lot of points about not doing this right now during COVID. They felt that should be put off. And so we can talk, if George puts it up, we can talk about what the results are. But one of the things I did want to mention, follow up on what someone just said a minute ago, the difference between 2- and 4-stroke, the biggest difference for residents is the sound. There's a significant sound difference between those that's obviously measurable. And enforcing that would be, as we enforce everything else, complaint-based, meaning if somebody complains, then we'd have to, listen whether or not it's meeting the ordinance or not, just like someone would complain of the noise at a party. So that's how that would be implemented if we chose to go through that. And on the impractical aspects of Spare the Air Day, I have to say most of the residents did not want to do Spare the Air Day. And I think that they maybe didn't understand the premises underneath it. This is one that I think the whole premise of Spare the Air Day really needs to be addressed at a level higher than us, meaning that there are different kinds of Spare the Air Days. There are ones that are ozone and there are ones that are particles. And I think going forward, our state's going to put a lot more effort into understanding smoke days and how they affect us. The reason why I think it's important is because on the smoke days, which all of a sudden have been through the roof starting this last fall and are probably going to continue that way, they drop a lot of really toxic particles and soot that's you can actually see it on your car. And so it's particularly bad to use any blower. So in that case, on Spare the Air Day, the issue is not sound. The issue is these particles that are airborne. So it's a complicated issue. And that's why the 4-question survey I sent out didn't really get to the heart of all the things that we really need to address here. But I think it's an important first step.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Rick, are you ready to make a comment?
I think that staff's done an excellent job in putting this information together. I think that I agree with Bill that there's more information that's still needed, and I'll address that. But I also think that we can make some decisions. I, for one, am not ready to move forward with an ordinance change. I think we need to do more work before we go to the ordinance, but I think there are some things that we can do. In general, I see 3 things. And the first is to respond to the staff request about whether or not to move forward with a test program with an electric blower and comparing that to the gas blowers. I think we should do that, and I think we should decide, and I don't know that we need a motion, but I think we should give direction to staff to do that beginning right away. The staff report suggests that we would buy a Echo electric blower, and I think there was some feedback during the one-on-one conversations that maybe there's other blowers that would be better. I don't have any judgment as to which blower is best, but I don't think we should go with the cheapest, and I don't think we should go with the most expensive. I think we should go with the one that gives the biggest bang for the buck in terms of the time of battery use and the power. I agree with Mike that it's possible that the technology isn't yet there. But I think the way we find out is to get some facts. And I think we should buy this, and I think we should launch into the program, and I think we should do a review of it, maybe, I don't know, on a quarterly or every 4 to 6 month basis. That's number 1. Number 2, I think the idea of public outreach and education is important. I think that there's information, as we get into this that we didn't think about, that we don't know. Carol Flaherty's inquiry into how many Spare the Air days there are in a year was terrific. That's really important information. 52 Spare the Air days, who would think that? And 20 some in a row. I agree with Bill that it's just not practical to require people not to clean debris off their walks and their property for 20 some days. That's not going to happen. If we try to make that happen, people are going to do exactly what they did when the pandemic started. They're going to have their gardeners take care of their properties. So I don't think that, I think the intent of not using blowers on Spare the Air days is good, but we have to make this practical. And there's no question, my gardener isn't getting up in the morning and going to a website to see whether it's a Spare the Air day. I don't know whether it's a Spare the Air day. So I just think before we enact an ordinance that addresses that, we've really got to think it through, and we need to do some more work on that, in my opinion. But I do think that we should do a public outreach, and I do think that staff should work with the EPC and get them engaged and provide advice to us so that we can launch an effective Spare the Air Day. And the third thing that I think that we should do is that we should get some more information. In specific, I think that the attachment to the staff report was very good in that it provided a good deal of information that we didn't previously have. But I think there's more information that's needed. And there's some assumptions that we all make that when I look at this information shows that some of my assumptions are wrong. For example, I assume that a 4-stroke gas engine is heavier than the 2-stroke gas engines because they're more powerful. So I assume they're bigger and therefore they're heavier. And the only gas engine that's identified in this attachment is the Makita 4-stroke engine, which is among the lighter leaf blowers. So I just think we need more information. And most of the gas engines aren't identified as to whether they're 2-stroke or 4-stroke. I think we need to know that. And I think we need to know how much runtime there is for each of these items. And that is not included in all of them. So I just think we need more data. I would like to ban 2-stroke engines because of the greenhouse gas pollution that they emit. This was a very big discussion at Peninsula Clean Energy. It was led by Woodside, who I believed chose to ban them. There's several other cities around that have banned 2-stroke engines. That was, I don't remember which ones, but it was presented at the Peninsula Clean Energy Board. I agree. I don't know how you enforce it. And I think we need to think through that. How do you know whether it's a 2-stroke engine or a 4-stroke engine? We know every enforcement is exactly as Diana said, it's complaint-based. And how do you tell? We shouldn't enact something that we can't manage properly and can't give direction to our residents. So I think we need some more time with this. But those are 3 things I would go forward and do now.
Thank you. Thank you. So from my perspective, the letters that we've received, there are passions that are and opinions on both spectrums about the ban them all, and just go completely to electric, or no, you can't not have gas powered, powerful blowers to take care and maintain our manicured acre plus lots throughout town. So I think that more education is really, really important. And I think it's an excellent job for the EPC committee to do that and to see how we can educate our residents and get more input from everybody on that. The Spare the Air Days, honestly, I'm torn about that, especially when you couch it in the fact that there are 26 consecutive Spare the Air Days. But I think that if you look at how many Spare the Air Days are in a consecutive string, it's typically maybe 1 or 2 at a time. I know that with the big fires, there was, I think, almost a whole week though of consecutive Spare the Air Days. But my real concern is not like on the properties, it's being where the blowers are blowing the right of ways. On the outside, the perimeter, on the street fronts, because most of them are the fine gravel that people have around where people can park their car, or loose dirt. And so what's really just getting blown is mostly that, and then some leaf and pine needle debris, but it just billows and billows and billows the clouds of particulate matter that I think is very, very unhealthy for little children who are being towed around in their strollers, and bicycles and things like that, and people walking more and more. So that's a really big issue for me that I think I'd like to explore a little bit more. I am pretty passionate about the trying to get more electric leaf blowers installed in our homes. And I, for one, have purchased what I think is a really robust electric blower for my gardening team. I don't have an acre, I have a half acre, but I have a pretty big frontage. And you know, the reduction in noise on the days that they come has been astoundingly better. Like, oh my goodness, you know, where the noise was just so at 8 o'clock in the morning, you just, oh, it's Friday morning, they're out here blowing and mowing again. But it's just a remarkable difference. So for that in itself, I'm happy for my investment. And I don't know, the residents who feel really strongly about transitioning from gas powered to electric, I would recommend that they make that little investment. It's not a huge investment for their own staff to try it out. And I wholeheartedly believe that we should go ahead and start our pilot program in the town and see how that works, and take some baby steps here. I think the three points that Councilmember DeGoya outlined are, you know, right on. There's probably more that we can do. I would like to see some spare the air day restrictions. I don't know how to really do that. It could just be through education of our residents and awareness. But I would also like to see if we could maybe try to restrict some of the right-of-way blowing, because you drive down the street and they're out there blowing and it's billowing and billowing, and sometimes a landscaper will hear your car coming or see you and stop, and the dust will kind of settle down so that you can go through. And other times you just go through a cloud of dust. So I think city manager would like to interrupt me. Go ahead, George.
No, sorry, not to interrupt you, but there's two specific directions with respect to the EPC. So if the council could be a little clearer on what you expect the EPC to do. You mentioned assisting with the education and outreach. And I think Councilmember DeGolia mentioned that they could assist with providing advice. So if there was some clarity there, that'd be helpful. Some of that might involve a budget for the EPC to go do those sorts of things. So we want to be clear on that.
Okay.
Well, whatever the EPC is doing, if they're sending things out, doesn't it have to be done through the town, George?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, so, you know, I think that, you know, one of our next things about a sustainability person, that would be one of the things we should assign them to do, to work with the EPC to develop mailers and maybe some things to put in some of the local newspapers that talk about that. And Mike has his.
Councilmember DeGoya?
Yeah, just to respond to George, I don't think what I was advocating is any different than what Elizabeth said. It was under the bullet point to provide direction on community education and outreach program. And I think that staff should do that, and that you should work with the EPC to bring a recommendation to the council I think that no doubt there'll be budget issues if they're doing more work. But I think they've
Those
been
are all-
limited. They've been limited to Earth Day. It's about time that they were able to do something that had a real impact, other than just an one-day event. Just on something else that Elizabeth said that I think is important is this issue about leaf blowers stirring up all this dust, especially in the streets and from one property to another. One of the benefits of doing this kind of review is that you get an opportunity to look at an ordinance that governs your town. And I was surprised to find that in our current ordinance, it's illegal for leaf blowers to blow in the street. So whenever you drive along and you see somebody blowing and the landscaper stopping to blow because the car is coming, which they often do, but they don't always do. It's certainly polite, but they're not supposed to be blowing the leaf blower in the street.
Well, this would have to be some kind of an education to our residents. I mean, oh, by the way, here's a copy of our ordinance. This has been on the books for so many years. Honestly, I was not aware of that, Rick. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And, please manage your staff. I don't know. I mean, it always kind of just seems to me that it's a natural environment on the outside and with the streetscape. It doesn't have to be a completely debris-free, and it's only debris-free for, a day or half a day. And it's just so polluting. But so where are we? What should we do? I know that we need to move on.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just one point. I had forgotten to raise this, and it was simply at the last meeting. I think the way we backed into the town buying the electric blower was sort of the theory that the town ought to be, eating its own dog food in terms of practicing, what it's going to preach, and maybe I would like to see the town perhaps take a lead in maybe not if we're considering banning leaf blowers on Spare the Air days, maybe the town should take the first step by not doing it itself before we make that an ordinance for the rest of the city, the rest of the town. But rather we just sort of voluntarily take the step to do it ourselves. We'll learn from that and we'll set an example.
Okay. That doesn't mean that we can't rake or sweep, right? Okay, so we're not going to change the ordinance right now, correct? We're just gonna do a pilot program with continuing with our purchase of our gas electric leaf blower for the park, and maybe factor in that we will not use it on Spare the Air days for a period of how long? 6 months?
Let's do it all the way through next fall so we can see
Okay.
how long they are.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment, Mike. I think we should eat our own dog food before we force our residents to change their behavior. That's part of the reason why I think doing the test with the electric blower and really comparing the effectiveness of it is so important. I mean, clearly we're covering a lot more property than our residents do when you look at the facts about how we're using a blower up to 120 hours a month compared to 30 to 60 minutes a week. But I think we should eat our own dog food. And if we're going to do this with Spare the Air days, let's do it ourselves. And then it's voluntary. We're not implementing an ordinance change. And if it turns out to be a serious problem, we can change it quickly.
Okay. So let's come back. Maybe I can get some help from Mona about this. at this time, we're not going to make revisions to the proposed ordinance at this time.
Well, the request of staff is to introduce a new ordinance that actually does all of this, and the pilot is specifically with respect to the town's use of these leaf blowers, but it sounds like perhaps that's not the direction in which you'd like to go.
So I think that we're opting to not introduce the proposed ordinance at this time, and we're going to direct staff to pursue issues in another direction, which is
Correct.
yes.
And so that could be the motion of the council to, and we will
Okay.
not move forward with the introduction of the ordinance.
So are we tabling it?
No, you're just not introducing it.
So,
I think Councilmember Hawkins had a comment.
oh, okay. I don't see her on my screen right now. But
Sorry, yeah, I was going to add on the reason for the pilot, just to give a little background on that again, was to, because when we were doing all the research and taking the public opinions, people were bringing really different numbers, and even in the literature, there's really different numbers on what the sound differences are and what the efficiency is. So what we talked about doing is doing actually a test where we could actually measure with the police department equipment the sound difference between 2-stroke and 4-stroke, and then also do a test where you're comparing the efficiency of the electric of all the different types of blowers. That's what we were talking about originally with the goal of doing the experiment or the pilot project. And I still think that those parts of it that we targeted to be more direct, that we actually get answers to those questions, and then we bring those questions back to inform some of our decisions.
okay. That sounds good. Shall we make a motion to that effect? Mr. Widmer?
Yeah, so I'd like to move that we move forward with the evaluation as we've discussed, and that we ask the EPC to work with staff to start developing communications and information for the public so we can better educate them and start moving things in that direction.
Did you want to add the spare the air days for the town?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that we wouldn't use the blowers on spare the air days, and we'll see how that goes.
Who's going to make the decision about what type of blower, electric blower? Staff?
Staff.
Robert,
Yes.
Okay,
We have a second?
yes. And Dan, did you second?
No, I was going to ask one more quick question, which was on the
Okay.
spare the air days. If we if we could set a committee to go and talk about how the current spare the air days and the newer rules that are coming in regarding smoke days that are in the works right now, because between those two, there may be more rules coming out that will help us define when we actually are going to not blow. Because if it's an ozone layer day and it's not producing particles on the ground that are toxic and dangerous, then maybe that's not the days so maybe there needs to be a division of a little further definition of spare the air day. And we might be able to get that with help from other organizations, the air board.
Okay. Is
We-
that something that you see the EPC could figure out, or would you like me to put an ad hoc committee together for that, to study that?
We can drill down on that, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll let staff do that. Okay, thank you. All right, well, we have a motion on the table. Anyone want to second that motion that Councilmember Widmer made?
I'll second it.
Okay, Councilmember DeGoya, we'll call for a roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry, could someone just repeat it to me? I think I understood it, but could someone just summarize it so I know what I'm voting on?
Sure. The suggestion was that the motion was that we would move forward with the evaluations of electric leaf blowers and 4-stroke engines in the
For
park.
the EPC.
And we would have the EPC participate in developing advertisements and or leaflets that we would mail out while working with staff. And then I amended and also put in the spare the air comments, but Diana brought up some very good points, but I think that we should at least have that in as a placeholder, and then we can amend that down later with the EPC's input.
And
So-
the town goes forward with their electric blower
Yeah.
pilot program.
Yes,
So,
definitely. Yeah, so they need the $1,200 and yes, I'm in favor of authorizing the test.
just a question about the EPC outreach. Is that to get information from residents, or is that to push out a policy position? What is that education? I just don't understand.
To inform people on the benefits of electric blowers and some of the hazards associated with the two-stroke engines where they mix the oil and the gas together.
And only consume 35% of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just for clarity, where is there was a merging of two of those motions there. One was the pilot program for the town.
Right.
We're going to be spending the money doing the pilot using electric leaf blowers in our operations for a while, reporting back to the council. The spare the air days, where we're going to narrow it down to the particular matter days, not the ozone days. And we can work with the air quality district to determine what those are. And then the EPC to develop the communications and information to the public and the community, educating them about benefits of electric leaf blowers and the hazards of two-stroke engines and such. Where is the
While working with staff.
While working with staff, where is the four-stroke issue experimentation coming in?
Well, I thought it was suggested that we evaluate also four-stroke versus two-stroke. Now, if we want to strike that, then that's fine, but that would be another evaluation.
Yeah, that would be the evaluation along with the, you're comparing the electric to, I don't know what staff currently has in the gas engine. Don't we have both 2 and 4-stroke engines?
I don't know, Robert.
I don't recall specifically, but we'll validate what we have. I don't want to buy another
No.
piece of equipment, so it'll just be measured against the items that we have, and we'll provide that information when we report back.
Okay.
Just a quick point of clarification, George, with regard to spare the air days, my proposal at least was that we not blow on spare the air days. If we learn out more about particulate matter and ozone days, we can adjust later. But I thought that as of this point, we'd have a bright line on spare the air days. We just wouldn't blow on those days.
That's one direction, but I thought it was modified to drill down on whether it's an ozone day or a particulate matter day. And
so my recommendation would be, let's do the blanket rule now, and as we learn more, if there's a reason to distinguish later, we can revise it.
I agree with Mike, and that's just for the town's operations.
Right.
Okay, I think that we should take that position.
Okay.
Anybody object to that? Put that in your motion, Mr. Widmer?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. And then we,
I take it?
Mr. Goya, you seconded? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hawkins Van Wellion,
Agree.
Segolia,
Yes.
Widmer,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lempress,
Aye.
and Mayor Lewis.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. Well, that was a lively discussion, and I am looking forward to seeing how it works for our town's operations. So going on to item number 16, the Sustainability Coordinator staffing is, Lisa, are you going to take that, or George?
Yes, I'll give that, and George, I'm sure will chime in responding to any questions you may have. So Anthony, we have a very brief presentation, but the item before you is to discuss assigning a sustainability coordinator. The sustainability efforts are really town-wide and encompass all different departments and different activities. Really, we're working on community education and outreach on sustainability practices, providing programs at reducing the town's carbon footprint. Next slide, please, Anthony. Implementing the adopted climate action plan. Staff regularly attends sustainability meetings as sponsored by the Regional Climate Action Planning program, as well as any sustainability-related regional and state proposals and legislation, which we would research and report to council on and prepare any related municipal code amendments for consistency. Next slide. Also, a lot of the effort would be working with the Environmental Programs Committee. So staff is a liaison to the Environmental Programs Committee, attends the bi-monthly meetings, and any additional ad hoc subcommittees. And so the EPC related efforts are really the annual Earth Day that you're well aware of, development and implementation of greenhouse gas reduction programs per the adopted climate action plan, an annual work plan effort to further strengthen and enhance town efforts, public education and outreach, and then any council directed sustainability efforts and or research. Next slide. Currently that's staffed by planning contract staff providing the sustainability support, and that's estimated about $61,000 for this fiscal year, and we're really anticipating that to increase. We've seen a steady increase year over year with the demands associated with sustainability programs and assisting the EPC. So we find it challenging to effectively implement sustainability efforts under the existing budget and under the existing staffing resources. Next slide. So we'd like the City Council to consider a new sustainability coordinating staff position that would increase the amount of staffing resources and budget dedicated to town-wide sustainability efforts as directed by the City Council. It could either be a consultant or a town employee at either full-time or part-time. And the scope of duties and competitive process could be identified for looking out for that consultant or the town position. We researched other jurisdictions, found the average salary ranged from $97,000 to $179,000. Most of the positions we found were classified as management analysts, with half of the time dedicated sustainability efforts, and most of those positions were managed under the city manager's office. So what we're looking for tonight, next slide, is direction on whether or not to move forward in evaluating a new sustainability coordinator staffing position. And I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, as well as City Manager George Rodrigues. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Any member of the council have questions for Lisa or George about this sustainability position?
George had his hand up.
George had his hand up?
Yeah.
I did, yes, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Whitmer. It was just in my pre-agenda meetings, I was asked if I could put forward a recommendation, and my specific recommendation is that the council consider engaging a consultant position, not a staff level position, so there's no ongoing pension, building a kingdom, that sort of thing, and that it be roughly 20 hours a week to start, about 1,000 hours a year, and that consultant be worked and managed through the city manager's office, and that would be Anthony and myself, and that the work be task-based. That's required by CalPERS as well. And that environmental oversight of the actual environmental programs committee also be shifted from the planning department to the city manager's office. And if the council supports that kind of move, that we work through all the numbers and try and incorporate something like that into the fiscal year 21-22 budget.
Okay. All right. With that information, any questions coming up for any council member? I have a question. So currently, from what Lisa's slide said, is that we are baked into the planning department's budget in that $61,000 range, right? And I guess that's for the staff time of Stephanie and Jake, I think, is the other person from planning that's been helping the EPC. So, and their amount of time, I'm not clear how much time both of those people have been spending.
Yeah, so if I could just clarify, when I made the budget recommendation to Robert, for the fiscal year budget, I did not include $61,000 for the environmental sustainability efforts. It was less than that, but that's the amount of effort that we have been putting in. So part of my concern is that we would be over budget this fiscal year if we continued at the current pace. Also, there's just been a really an increase, right, in the amount of work and the effort and the I guess the expertise really that's needed to assist the town with this effort. And so we had some great conversations with George about, it's probably a great time to transition this over into a dedicated staff position. So somebody that's not also working on some planning projects and might have a push and pull with some different priorities given, change in workload as to current projects as they come in. And also somebody that can really take a look at this as a town-wide approach that can influence all the other departments and all the different operations. So that's what we're anticipating based on our current effort, but certainly there's a lot of interest from the council and the EPC to maybe increase that education, increase the research aspects, and we're just that trend going upwards with the demand for staff time.
Okay, thank you. Any council member have a question for Lisa? Diana?
As I understand it, we, in 2016, I think, is when we wrote our last environmental program thing. And there are every X number of years, you're supposed to update it to say, yes, we've achieved our goals. And then the next goal is, I don't know if it's 2030 or something like that. In other cities like Menlo Park and other cities around us, this year updated their cap, I think it's called. And they set aside the effort to actually see whether or not they met the goals that were set out, in our case in 2016. So that's sitting in front of us. So that is a pretty big task. So I really see that we have a need for this. The question that I have is, not to mention the things we just got done talking about in terms of how it informs us with policies. We would have a person who could answer some of the questions we were just throwing out to each other in the earlier discussion. But my question is, if we get this new person, which I think is a great idea, would we still have use of Stephanie and Jake? Or would this replace them? They would no longer be on this?
That's correct. It'd be out of the city manager's office instead of the planning department. Planning department would be task focused based on applications that come across the public counter. And then the city manager's office would supervise the consultant, and the consultant would work with the EPC.
So right now, a lot of the green stuff has to do with green building codes, which is one of the next biggest things that we have to take on is green building codes. So if you take it out of planning, will they still be involved, but they'll just be interfacing with this new additional staff?
That's correct. And I suspect if we find a person with the expertise in sustainability efforts to fill this position, we'll find somebody with that cross-departmental expertise. That's the goal.
Okay. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, so just a process question, I guess. What we're doing here is building in a request that we will see again when the budget comes up. Is that what's happening?
Yes.
So at that point, we'd be able to say, hey, we got to prioritize. We may start trading off different potential priorities, right? We may be hiring a police officer instead or this instead. Would that be done at that stage?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'll just note, I got a real kick out of the memo. It goes to Diana's point that she just raised. There's a sentence in here that says, entering 2021, it may be useful for the town to evaluate its current progress in meeting the 16% GHG reduction target by 2020. Which I got to agree, it may be useful for us to know how we're doing. Okay.
To be clear, we have not spent enough time on our climate action plan implementation. And I think that we do have a responsibility to update it and to really focus on that. So, yes, Diana.
I want to say that it's not all bad news, because the county of San Mateo put out sustainability report this year. And that's one of the things we should try to update our thing to match. And the good news is that we do have a lot of electric cars. So we're doing better on that front. And that's not even in our plan, but we're doing well on the electric cars. So it is time to revisit and at least bring it up to date of our own county, let alone we can expect there'll be more policies coming down the pike with the new administration.
Okay, all right. So any other questions? I'm gonna open it up to the public for public comment on this item, number 16, regarding a sustainability coordinator consultant, not a staff member. Anthony, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak?
No, I don't have it. I was told by Ms. Flaherty that she intended to make
Carol has her hand up.
Does she? Okay, so Ms. Flaherty.
But she doesn't have her mic on.
There we
Floor is
go.
yours.
There we go. So I probably would have paid absolutely no attention to this if it were somewhere else in the agenda, but because it came after my pet peeve, item 15, then it got my attention. And I'll be honest with you, when I read this, I thought to myself, have we lost our minds? That we are going to spend in this town potentially over $100,000 when I read all the salaries elsewhere for a sustainability coordinator. Now, I don't have any doubt that we have a lot of need and that we have a lot of reports we have to do and analyses. But what the people in this town really care about is taking $100,000 and buying some more cameras, because it would be really nice to know that we can go away and not be robbed on a weekend. Or we can actually come home at 6 o'clock at night and find out the house wasn't robbed at 5:30. We have had a rash of robberies and people are very unsettled. And I'm quite sure the people in Linden would like to have a few more cameras in that part of the town as well. So I thought George gave a very, very thoughtful alternative. I can clearly see the need for a part-time person. You're dead on, George. As a former corporate finance person, why pay all the benefits if you don't have to hire a full-time person? And so I just encourage you guys to spend less on this and more on the robberies and how we're going to stop those and find the robbers. That's it. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you, Carol. Always on point. Okay. Any other member of the public wish to make a public comment? I'll bring it back to our council members for comments and deliberation. I think that our discussion is to evaluate how we're going to deal with the sustainability issues that are being mandated to the town, as well as being needed by the town and through discussions like the leaf blower ordinance potential, and what George has modified in the ask. And looking back at how much we've really been leaning heavily, it's been an evolution with the planning department from the very beginning. It used to be the EPC was staffed by the arborist, you know, and then it evolved that the planning department staffed with us. And I think Lisa and Stephanie are really correct. We've kind of outgrown their ability. And I think they've just gotten too expensive for us also. I think we can get somebody for a lot less money as a consultant and on a as needed part-time basis. I see Councilmember Whitmer jumping up and down in his red room. He is about to have a cow. Would you like to say something?
I think this is an overdue request, and I support the part-time person. When I looked through the CAP that was attached to the staff report, you know, there are a lot of things that we have done and we haven't updated it, and it'd be great to know exactly where we are. And we just gave some work potentially to this person to work with the EPC. So I think the part-time thing, let's start with part-time at this point in time, and we can evaluate it on a yearly basis.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else want to jump in with their opinion? Don't be shy. I'll call on you. Mike? Are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely
Vice
here.
Mayor?
I think I agree with Bill. I'd like to see this be part of the budget process, and we'll make more trade-offs in in the budget time. But this all makes good sense to me. Again, by the way, I'd favor a part-time position as recommended by George.
Good. Okay. Mr. DeGoya?
I agree 100% with what both Mike and Bill said. I think we should go with George's preferred solution, 1,000 hours a year, moving EPC to under the city manager's office, where this consultant would be, makes lots of sense to me. I agree that we haven't spent enough time with our climate action plan, and I guess I think, and this is a tangential issue, that the EPC probably needs to meet monthly rather than bi-monthly.
Okay.
But
We'll cross that bridge.
this will probably enable that, and without incurring a lot more costs. So that would be a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Diana, do you want to weigh in on this?
I agree with the part-time person, and if we had more time to evaluate it, we might be able to do a consultant on a project basis that might be cheaper if we could define exactly what we want that person to do. But I would feel strongly that the type of person we're going to get is a person who is has a lot of education in the space, who really knows what's happening in the county and on the state level, and has some amount of like a real environmental scientist. That we get someone who really knows what they're doing.
Good advice. Okay, George, is that enough direction for you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I will close that topic, and we are going to move on to item number 17, adopting a resolution amending the fees for our tennis key fees for the Holbrook Park tennis courts. Who's going to
Thank
tee
you.
this up?
This is Robert Ovadia,
Robert.
Public Works Director. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. As titled, we're seeking the council's review and adoption of a resolution to amend the tennis court key fees for Holbrook Palmer Park. As you all know, access to the courts for residents and non-residents is provided through key sales. And they are available for purchase annually. The proceeds from the sale of the keys are kept in a special fund for maintenance and purchase of equipment and appurtenances for the tennis courts. The fees are located in the town's master fee schedule. Though most of the fees that are in the town schedule are required to be based on the actual cost of service, fees related to rental of park facilities can be based on marking conditions and are set at the discretion of the city council. In October of this past year, Michael Jessup with Player Capital Tennis, who manages the tennis courts and the tennis program at the park, provided his annual update to the Park and Rec Committee. And during that conversation with the Park and Rec Committee, Mr. Jessup suggested that the town can look at changing the type of material that's used for surfacing the courts. He mentioned an item called Titan Max, which is a little sturdier than the slurry type surface that we have been applying recently, and estimated that the cost would be approximately $20,000 per court. The conversation was deferred by the committee to the following meeting in November, and Mr. Jessup was asked to provide some additional information. And in the intervening time, Mr. Jessup reached out to key holders and surveyed them as to their opinion regarding a potential increase in fees. The proceeds of those fees would be going towards maintenance of the facilities. And he received approximately 61 survey responses, with a majority, 47, indicating that they would support an increase. There were 14 respondents that responded no. In consideration of the responses and the proposal to perform additional maintenance to the courts, the Park and Rec Committee recommended that there be an increase of $50 per key for residents and $75 per key for non-residents. As indicated, we typically do a seal coat every 3 years on the various courts to kind of maintain their current surface, to maintain a surface. It does include some crack filling and a limited amount of taping. And this is done to buy time on the courts. We know that they require a more substantial maintenance. We have been accumulating funds in the tennis fund to help do that. As we continued our dialogue with Mr. Jessup, the cost of the Titan Max overlay increased a bit. He had indicated in November that the dollar amount was closer to $35,000. And we actually reached out to a resurfacing or a tennis contractor, and they actually recommended an overlay versus the Titan Max or a full reconstruction of the courts. And the cost of that varies a bit, but we're looking at somewhere around $40,000 to $60,000 if we do an asphalt overlay. Our current tennis fund has approximately $200,000 in it, which will take us partway to taking care of the courts. As you know, we have 5 regular courts and 1 clay court. And in the staff report, you have the historic fees that we've been charging residents and non-residents, as well as a summary of the number of keys that we've sold. As you can tell by the table, there's been a substantial increase this past year, and we think that that's predominantly due to the pandemic. 171 keys were purchased by residents in 2020 versus 115 the year before. Currently, our key charges are $50 for Atherton residents for the regular courts. We charge $200 per key for non-residents. And for the usage of clay courts, non-residents are charged on an hourly basis at $30 per hour, and Atherton residents can purchase a key to the clay courts at a cost of $50. And so with the proposed increases as recommended by the Park and Rec Committee, Atherton residents would be charged $100 for regular courts. The cost of the clay court key would remain at $50. And for non-residents, the cost would be up to $275 for a regular court key, and clay court usage would remain at $30 per hour. We've provided council with a few options to consider. One is you can maintain the current fees. That would not provide any additional revenues beyond that we get currently for increased court maintenance. You have the Park and Recreation Committee's recommendation. And then after further review, we provided a third option wherein residents that pay $100 for the standard key can get 1 clay court key included with that purchase. So overall it would be $100, but that would provide access to both the regular courts as well as the clay court. In looking at how many people purchased the clay court keys on its own this past year, we're talking about $900 in terms of the value of the 18 keys that we sold. And so with that, I'm available to answer questions. I have Sally, who is the park manager, as well as Mike Jessup, available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions from any member of the council? To clarify.
I have a question.
Rick. Uh-huh.
Robert, when you got the new information regarding this Titan Max surface, did you circle back with Michael Jessup at all?
We did.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Vice
Yeah,
Mayor.
like two questions. One, as I understand this, we don't know exactly what we're going to do and how much it's going to cost, but we are going to raise the fees. And so I'm curious about how we did it, because normally you calculate a user fee to accomplish a specific goal. So how do we get these fee numbers, and what does that do to move us to a goal?
Okay, so right now, like I said, we have about $200,000 in the account. We know it's insufficient to do a substantial resurfacing of the courts, so we know that we need additional funds. And it's the direction that we are headed, but we are going to do further evaluation is with a new asphalt overlay. But we will also have to hire somebody to do some design work, put bid packages together, et cetera. But our intent is to work with Michael Jessup as to a further evaluation, along with a couple of conversations with contractors that are more familiar with tennis court maintenance than staff is, to come up with a final recommendation on the repair costs.
But do we think this would be sufficient to take us through a full reconstruction, or whatever the terminology is?
I think that it's not going to be a full reconstruction, but it's going to be a more substantial repair. And we would not do all of the courts at once, so we would stagger them as we currently do. And so by the time we get to the latter courts, we will have accumulated a couple more years of the additional funds.
And then my next question is with regard to the clay courts. Maybe Michael Jessup can answer this, but I thought one of the big issues with clay courts was the maintenance on them. And if we do something that increases the number of people that go on those courts, is there going to be an increased maintenance cost or something else we should keep in mind?
Michael, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can now. Thank you.
Yes. No, there's no increase. The clay court is actually, the maintenance stays the same regardless. I think basically the town is paying $2,000 a year for a once a year maintenance. And then there's some clay bags that have to be spread out once a month or so, which we take care of, and we just spread the clay out along it. So the maintenance is more of a sweeping daily 5-minute maintenance than you have to go and resurface courts ever.
So you wouldn't have concern if we did something that ended up encouraging some folks to go on the clay court who aren't there now?
No, that doesn't impact the lifetime of the court at all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Any other council member have a question? I have a question. I guess these raising the fees, the level of increase, do you think that the market will bear that? I mean, has there been any market study about, other costs, what other keys are going for? And are we going to price ourselves out of the market if we raise them too high? Or do you think that the option number 2 that the Park and Rec has recommended, I guess that's the one that you're really looking for, right, to do?
Well, I can answer. I think that there was some investigation done with regards to the tennis court key charges. And I think that for our residents, keeping it at that $100 range is going to be reasonable and compared to other potential courts. Michael did do his survey outreach to key holders, and the greater majority of the respondents seemed that they were in favor of allowing that to happen.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
Yeah, and when this was presented to the Park and Rec, I don't recall if it was Michael or Alex K. I think it was Michael, but there was a report on what the other key charges are in surrounding cities, and we're way under them.
Okay. All right. Diana, did you have a question, or Mr. Widmer? Want to weigh in on this?
No, I got just comment later.
Okay. All right. I'm going to close down the council question period and open it up to any member of the public if they want to make a statement or have any questions for staff or Mr. Jessup. Anthony, anybody have their hands raised?
No, I don't see anyone with hands raised. Just for anybody, members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment, you can select participants at the bottom of your screen, raise your hand, or put a question in the chat and we will call on you. But I don't see anybody here.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for further comments and recommendations.
No?
Mr. Widmer.
Sure. I think it's time that we do raise it. As you know, I was supportive at one time of having our residents pay zero, but we need to maintain the courts and they are starting to get into disrepair. I applaud the city staff for coming up with option 3. I think that's a great option. And so my support would be to stick with option 3, where they would have access to the clay courts. So the clay courts get a little bit more used. And obviously they're going to have to go through the reservation system. So there's not going to be a deluge of people. So.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? I have no, I would support option 3 if that's what we're looking at. I think that's fine. Rick?
Yes, so I was at the Park and Rec meeting when this came before it. I support the increase in the fees as recommended. Option 3, including the clay court, I'd like to know what Michael Jessup's opinion is about that. Whether it sounds like there's not going to be damage to the courts if there's more people that use it, but I would like to know what his opinion about that is. From our side, it looks like we lose about $1,000 a year because we've currently getting about $1,000 from town residents who are paying the extra money for that key. I don't think that's a material difference, but I would like to know what Michael thinks about it.
Is he still here?
Yeah. He's on mute.
There we go.
There he is.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be option 3. I think is a good option because I think when I talked to Sally, she mentioned what it would allow us to do is just have 1 key versus 2 keys. And
right.
I think it costs quite a bit, just maybe even $900 just to have a whole second set of keys because we have to replace that every single year.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'd actually be losing any money by making it a 1 key system.
Great.
That sounds smart. That sounds reasonable. Okay. So
I support option 3.
Okay. We're going to have a resolution. So do we need a motion, George? Yes. Okay.
I'm happy to move it.
Make a motion that we adopt the resolution amending the fees for tennis key fees for Holbrook Palmer Park tennis courts per option 3 in the staff report.
Second.
And a second by Rick. Roll call, please.
Hawkins,
Yes.
Segolia,
Yes.
Widmer,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lemprus,
Aye.
and Mayor Lewis.
Yes, so that motion carries. Let's move on to item number 18, consideration of a letter to the Biden administration in support of Clean Water Act and protection of the Redwood City salt ponds. So George, you want to just kind of outline this for us, please?
Sure, thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, this one actually came to me via the mayor. And she forwarded the email that's attached to the staff report from, it shows Supervisor Dave Pine's information and signing on to it, but it's actually from Save the Bay.
Save the Bay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the town to sign on to the letter. There's a draft letter that's attached to the staff report. That's identical to what's in the email chain. And the recommendation is that the council consider sending a letter of support, a similar letter of support to the Biden administration, or you can amend that to any other local offices you choose.
Okay. Any questions from any council member having to do with this item? Any questions for staff? Seeing none, are there any members of the public that have a question about this or a comment that would like to speak? I did get one letter sent to me from Janet Larson, who you know is a resident of Atherton, in support of us signing on this. As you know, 10 years ago, she and several other residents came to council and brought this development proposal to our attention, and through Save the Bay, we were successful in squashing that. And these are former Cargill salt flats. And if anyone has ever seen the Bedwell Bayside Park, I'm sorry. Yes, but at the end of Marsh Road, as you go over the Dumbarton Bridge, the restoration of those salt flats near the Dumbarton Bridge over the years is just been remarkable. And that's something that could happen at some future point in the Cargill salt flats. But through the Trump administration, they overturned that, and EPA ruling, and was going to open it up for development. So now with the new administration, Save the Bay is asking elected officials to write a letter and save those salt flats from development. Okay. Does anyone have a comment on that at this point?
Well, are you doing public comment?
Yeah, well, I said, so Janet Larson sent a letter and in support of us signing on this letter. And that's the only letter that I received. I didn't know if anybody else was here to speak. And I'll bring it back for comments from the council. If not, do we need a motion for this?
No, I actually do have a comment on this.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's sort of an overarching comment, not even first specific to this letter. This reminds me of the thing we did a little while ago with the nuclear weapons stuff. And I think these kind of letters raise, at least this letter raises 3 issues for me that cause me concern. The first of which, it's a national issue that's kind of outside our reach. And I'm not sure, I just don't know enough about this salt pond. I don't know what the issue is, the Redwood City Salt Pond issue with regard to the Clean Water Act. And I certainly don't know, 2 things. One, so start out with, it's a national issue beyond our reach. And in terms of how these things appear, they just kind of appear on our agenda. We don't know anything about them. And there's no prioritization given to them. So we're not having a thoughtful process about where we want to speak as a town and where we don't. These things, from my perspective, just kind of appear suddenly. That's one. And 2, with regard to the specific one, this is beyond my expertise, at least. And I'm not sure that anybody on the council knows what this is really about. It appears to be about a jurisdictional issue relating to the Clean Water Act and an appeal, and asking for an appeal to be withdrawn. That may well be the right thing to do. I just don't know. And I don't think this letter really does much to talk to that issue. And then my final observation would be the letter's a little bit pugnacious, I'd say. And it seems like we got this from a lobbyist and we're going to sign off on it, or being asked to sign off on it. And I don't think it's the most dignified letter. I think it's the kind of thing that we could, if we choose to sign up, we should perhaps make it a little less pugnacious, as I say. Those are my three thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. Any other council member have a comment about this? Diana?
I think it is a good, I agree that I'm not at all opposed to making it sound better and more in our own voice. And I suspect that a lot of this issue will go away with the Biden administration and some of their issues around this, but I don't know for sure. This particular one, as he said, I'm not sure how it works with the Clean Waters Act and some of the other things that they've announced already and are about to announce. So I think that it will be a good thing for us to do, but I agree that we should maybe make our own wording for it. And I think I would put in the same bucket also as the church thing. So all of these are things that I agree, they come up and we don't prioritize them overall, and they just kind of get debated on the moment and then we agree to them. But
Okay. Good points. Anybody else? Mr. Widmer?
Sure. So, going into this, and I get letters from the Save the Bay all the time. It appears that, there was a lawsuit, that involved the EPA versus Bay Watchers, I believe. And I agree with the concept here that we should support the restoration of the Bay. What I don't like is Bay Watchers, because this is a group of lawyers that all they do is they read reports that people put out, and then they go ahead and sue, and then they settle for money. Then that's how they make their money. So I do believe that we should be restoring the salt flats, and so I'm supportive of that if we reconstitute the letter. But
Okay.
I did want to comment on the Bay Watchers.
Thank you. Okay. Rick, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on it. So this is an issue that I am very familiar with, although I agree with what Mike said about the tenor of this letter, and the focus of the letter is kind of on clean water issues, which at a national level. I don't think this is Bay Watchers, Bill. I think this is Save the Bay.
Okay, wow.
And I think they're quite different. They've got little boats that they go around the bay on, trying to protect the bay. And I'm sure they engage lawyers. There's no doubt about that. But let me give some background, because I was familiar with this last year, and I think that this issue is kind of similar to the issue that we discussed last week about church services. And I mean, it's a broader issue than just Atherton, but it directly impacts Atherton. And the reason this one directly impacts Atherton is if you just go down Woodside Road, you end up in the bay at the point that is addressed in this letter. And that bay land, it's water. Property is owned by Cargill. It had been used for harvesting salt from the bay for decades, and it hasn't been used for that purpose in a long time. That property was in a classification that made it undevelopable, and the EPA in the last 4 years removed it from that classification and made it so that the Clean Water Act would not apply to that property, which made it available for development. That caused an uproar in Redwood City, which is how I became familiar with it. And I was contacted by Janet Borgens, who represents that district, and looked into the issue. And it was a big issue. I mean, Cargill, with support from the EPA, for some reason, was moving forward to try to develop it, and Save the Bay got very involved to try to stop that development. I think it applies to us because it's in such close proximity to us. And I'm actually not that familiar with how the national clean water issue applies. And I'd much rather see the letter rewritten to address the issue of development of the Bayland property that is right next to us, and that there's a park that goes around it that I've walked many times, and that is, I think our residents use that area for recreation. So I think it does apply to us. And I'd like to approve a letter. I think we could rewrite it, have it rewritten.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, y'all have been reading my mind, because I thought that the letter was a little harsh, and certainly is not some of the words that I would use in the names of people at, specifically. But this was the letter that was sent, and we just kind of sent it on. So if I could make a suggestion that I work with the city manager on rewriting the letter, and we bring it back for another go round in February.
Actually, I'm fine for you to work with the city manager, and if you approve it, I'm good with it.
I second
it?
it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Elizabeth, on that, if I could just get my 2 cents in, I agree, by the way, I'm going to be happy with that. My preference would be to pull it away from technical legal issues that I know nothing about, and push it towards the importance of saving the bay and that kind of stuff. And I'd be very, very supportive of that.
Okay. How about you, Diana? You okay with that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Super. Okay, thank you all. Okay, we'll close this item and go on to our last item, which is to talk about the grand jury report, second units adding new housing in the neighborhoods. Actually, this is our second to the last. I'm sorry. We got to get going on this, guys. It's almost 9 o'clock. All right,
Right.
Lisa.
Thank you. Staff worked with agencies with the 21 Elements group to prepare a uniform response to the grand jury report. Staff has customized that response to be more applicable to Atherton. And the City Council's response to the grand jury report is due by January 26th. The response is attached to your packet and as well included in the body of the staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any member of the council? Any public have any questions or comments on this item? Anthony, any public hand raised? Okay. Any comments?
Nothing.
Okay. Bringing back to council, I think that George indicated in his one of his one-on-ones that there was a suggestion from a council member to add something. Would you like to talk about that? Whoever it was.
Certainly can. It was to suggest within response number 5 that there are other additional barriers to the creation of second units, one of which may be the additional property taxes that are required for the additional square feet created. So it was recommended that that be suggested as tax relief consideration for homeowners that create registered second units.
That was my suggestion.
How did I know?
I don't know, he probably told you.
No, he didn't. He doesn't kiss and tell. No, it's just in his little summary. But so what does anybody think about that? How we could make that suggestion to the grand jury, put that in it? I thought the response was very well done. Okay, don't everybody speak at once.
I'm awake and I agree. How's that?
Okay. George, I mean, Mona, do you see any problems in adding that tax relief consideration?
No, I don't. This is the town's opportunity to response, including, and that's within the scope. So I do not.
Okay. I think that that's what we should do then, and fire it off before the deadline. How's that? Any objection? Okay.
You do need a
So
motion for that, Madam Mayor.
Oh, okay. Mr. Widmer, would you like to make your motion?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to move that we approve our response to the grand jury report and amend or add to finding 5 with the suggestion that that there be a property tax moratorium or suspension for people that are adding these ADUs to their property.
Okay, can I get a second on that? Diane?
Second.
Okay, Diane seconded. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Hawkins,
Aye.
Agolia,
Aye.
Widmer,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lemprus,
Aye.
and Mayor Lewis.
Aye, okay. Now, this is gonna be fun. Ugh. Sure don't want to table this one. Continue it, no. So George, this is Marty is Marty here to talk to us about it?
He is here.
Furniture. Okay, this is furniture for the new town center. Marty, talk to us about item number 20.
Madam Mayor, may I make a suggestion or raise a question? There's kind of two issues caught up in here. Could we segregate them and talk about them separately?
Oh, yes, right. The telecommunications and the furniture.
Yeah, exactly.
Mayor?
You want to do the furniture first?
Sure. Mayor, can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can hear you, Marty.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Yeah, actually, I was going to do it that way. Again, this is your monthly report on the Town Center project. And today we have two action items for council. And the first one I'll handle, and then the second one I'll hand that off to Chief McCulley to handle. But for now, for the recommendation, I'll read both of those, and then I'll handle the furniture, fixtures, and equipment piece. So the first recommendation is authorize the city attorney to prepare and the city manager to execute an agreement with KBM Hogue to provide, deliver, and install the necessary furniture, fixtures, and equipment, otherwise known as FF&E, for the new City Hall Police Building only in the amount of $409,641.54, and authorize change orders up to $41,000, roughly 10% of that amount, for a total budget of $450,000. Now, the second recommendation, which again Chief McCulley will handle, is to authorize the city attorney to prepare and the city manager to execute an agreement amendment with Telecommunications Engineering Associates, TEA, to provide new federal state required additional encryption capable communication systems and increase their current budget by $119,667 to a total of $379,747, and authorize change orders up to $30,000 for a total amount of $409,747. So with that, moving on to the furnitures and fixtures, and in your staff report, this is your monthly staff report showing all the activities that have been going on. The next 3 weeks is the mayor, Lewis, and the council member Hawkins Manuel saw on January 5th on their site visit. Things are very active on the site. Things are moving very quickly on the project. We're about 2/3 done with the overall project. And that's why having an agreement with these vendors for the furniture is critical now to meet that timeline that we're going to be meeting to move people into the new City Hall building around the 1st of July. And as time is flying, everybody knows that's going to be right around the corner. So we need to hopefully get approval from the council today on this agreement, and then there'll be more following here in the next few months, again with moving companies and things like that to get people moved in. So now going back to the background, is that back in 2017, MAC 5 did a preliminary cost estimate for the FF&E based on an assessment of the needs of staff at that time. And the total number they came up was $1,218,688. And because the funding sources between the library and the city were separate, the library FF&E was about $775,000, and the City Hall Police Building $443,688. And based on the agreement that the town and the library JPA based on October 20th had, the library folks are going to do the procurement for their FF&E. And so that's being handled by Rachel McDonald and Anne Marie Despain. And their library board will be approving that vendor contract. In both cases, we and the library are working with WRNS to define the needs and types of equipment. And further, we've interviewed all our staff again, because the last one was done about 4 years ago, to make sure if any things have changed. And then we have, of course, the COVID issue to deal with, and so that changed a few things. And then back in August, in consultation with the city attorney, I asked if we could piggyback off another state or local agency's competitive bid procurement list to really streamline the process. And she opined, yes, we can do that off the state's list, the State of California Department of General Services, which pre-qualifies vendors procurement list to guarantee we're going to get the best bids from these types of contractors. And then based on the WNS experience with vendors in this area that they've worked with, they recommended that we provide and solicit bids from KPM Hogg and Knoll, it's a team, and then also with MGS West in Hayworth Incorporated. So we sent them our spreadsheets with all the items that we wanted bid prices for, and asked them to return those prior to Christmas. And so on December 21st, we received both bids, one from KPM Hogg and Knoll for $393,446.78, and MGS West and Hayworth and Knoll, or Hayworth, for $301,560.80. However, upon review by staff and WNS, it was determined that the team of MGS West and Hayworth did not provide all the information that we requested. In fact, out of the 64 bid items, and this is in your attachment, you can see all the bid items, they left out 19 bid items out of the 64. So that, at that point, that was a real red flag for us. And then at that point, staff asked for them to provide additional bids on some coat racks and also some plexiglass for the public counters due to the COVID issues. And so then back in about January 8th or 9th, we got the revised bids from KPM Hogg and Knoll. Their bid was $409,641.54. MGS West and Hayworth Incorporated came at $328,641.74. However, again, when we reviewed both bids, KPM Hogg both times met everything, provided all the information we requested for as far as bid prices. But MGM West and Hayworth, again, were deficient in providing the information we requested. So at that point, after really 2 strikes, they were deemed unresponsive, and we don't have any confidence that they would deliver things, even though the prices were lower. We don't think they met the intent of providing us with accurate bids. And so if they can't do that, I'm not sure how they would deliver products later on if we were to go with them. So again, staff is recommending KPM Hogg and Knoll for $409,641, and then also with a contingency of $41,000. So again, city council action is required to, again, have the city attorney prepare these agreements and city manager to execute them. Time is critical here because it's going to take about at least 8 to 10 weeks to get this furniture ordered. And we would need to have that furniture sometime in mid-May delivered. And then we're going to have it tested with the staff to make sure they're going to pick out. And I believe there's going to probably be a council subcommittee that's going to help work with us on some of the public furniture that we're going to have to put that into the timing. And so, and then getting the agreements between the town and the contractors probably take at least 2 or 3 weeks. So now's the time we need to get this contract moving. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Thank you, Marty. Any questions for Marty on this right now? I have a couple of questions, Marty.
Sure.
So you worked with WRNS in speccing these pieces of furniture, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a showroom where someone could go and touch and feel any of these pieces?
We're going to have them actually provide this. So the attachment in your staff report shows every one of these items. And I know it's a long document, but they're all in there. And what we plan to do is, like for chairs and desks and all that, we're going to have because of COVID, we have to have an area that's pretty wide open where people can come and pick exactly what kind of chair they want, what kind of desk they want one going up and down or not. And so that's where we're going to have people, the staff test drive exactly what they're going to end up getting. So
But-
they're going to provide probably 3 options for chairs and things like that. And that'll probably be sometime in May.
But that would be after we let the contract for
Correct.
this style, this specific style of furniture,
Yeah,
correct?
this contract, so there's going to be a lot of flexibility. So if the subcommittee, the council says we want to have something a little different, or maybe staff changes his mind, we're going to have that flexibility, Mayor.
Okay. Were the 2 bids similar in style of and quality of furniture? Were
Yes,
they kind
WNS
of
felt,
identical?
yeah, WNS felt the furniture, the type for both companies were very, very similar. There really wasn't any kind of difference as far as warranty, quality, and all that.
Okay. All right. Are there any members of the public that have a question for Marty about this furniture?
Rick had his hand up.
Oh, Mr. Widmer,
He
you
said
do?
Rick has his hand up for a question.
I'm sorry, I don't have him on my screen.
Okay.
Hi, Rick.
Hey there.
Speak up.
2 questions. It sounds like you haven't seen them yet, and that your expectation is that you'll see them first in May.
Yeah, I'm sorry, once we get the order in, and right now they're telling us it's going to take 8 to 10 weeks. And once that gets delivered, we'll work out some plan where everybody can actually look at the furniture and touch it. So right now, I'm assuming that probably be in May sometime.
But we will have already paid for it. We will have already ordered it, I think.
But Marty, 3 weeks ago, I went to the library administrative offices where WRNS brought all of the proposed furniture. They hadn't paid for anything yet, and set the different types of furniture around, and there were some options. And we spent 2 hours going over the furniture. You can't do it looking at a picture. So it was available 3 weeks ago for the library. I'm surprised that at least some of the furniture for the town isn't as easily available. And I don't think that got set up 3 months ago by the library staff. I think that was pulled together pretty quickly, and it was extremely effective. We decided on a variety of chairs and tables, and there were a couple where they didn't quite have what people wanted, but they were able to go back and find something that would address what people wanted. So it was very effective. I would strongly recommend that you push WRNS on that, because they've done it for the library.
That's exactly our plan. Is they're not going to have everything ready in 6 days, but they're going to, hopefully the vendor is going to have a lot of this equipment. So as soon as possible, and that's what we want to do, is find out exactly what furniture do they have currently in stock that we can test drive it, and maybe there's some special order stuff that we can't until later on. So if there's an opportunity, if they have things in their warehouse that we can look and sit and whatever, we're going to do that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think it's really important to do it before the furniture gets ordered. So my second question is, in the staff report, it references the library, and it says we're only dealing with the town hall because the library JPA is paying for the library furniture. My question is, I just want to confirm that that isn't being paid out of the portion that's coming from the town. That's the library administrative fund, not the town's excess revenue fund.
Yeah, council member, I'll defer to either the city manager or Robert Brown on that issue.
Okay.
We executed an agreement for that, Councilmember DeGolia, if you recall, for their advancement of funds.
No, but this should not be coming out of the advancement of funds. The furniture is part of the library's obligation, completely separate from the advancement of funds.
Understood, but it was addressed within the advancement of funds agreement, how it would be paid for. So we've already executed that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other council member have a comment about this right now? Or a question? Any member of the public? Okay, back to council about for comments. Mike, do you have something to say?
I'd start out by saying I don't consider this one of my great strengths, Elizabeth.
Okay, that's fine. Just,
okay.
you know, let everybody else take care of it then.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I mean, so I'm interested in that we do a smart thing, but I don't have any specific anything
Okay.
right now to contribute.
How about Diana?
Did they answer the question about there being a showroom? So if they can, I agree with having to commit to such a large sum of money without actually having touched the actual furniture and ordering it just from a picture. So if they can't do what Rick was saying of bringing the pieces in, is there a showroom, even if it's in San Francisco? Are they in the design center, or could we do a field trip to go see them?
Yeah.
We're in San Francisco, and so as soon as, if council approves this agreement, that's gonna, first thing I'm gonna do tomorrow is try and set up that either a warehouse visit or where they bring stuff out to the town or wherever, so people can look and touch it. Because the contract itself, the agreement's gonna probably take 2 or 3 weeks to process.
Do we get to see it before we buy it, is what I'm saying. So it sounds like you're saying sign the agreement and then we'll go see it. So that's.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
We're
that's the only
selecting a
way, I mean,
vendor, but we're
with the
not buying
agreement,
the furniture.
go ahead.
We're selecting the vendor for it, but we're not buying the specific furniture, where those selections still have to be made. And if, as Marty indicated, if we don't like the conference table that they provided in the selection, we can change that up. Or if we don't like the council chairs for the public in the council chambers, we can change that up as we go.
Right, we're not wedded to any of this. This is just like a ballpark of what we're gonna get. And again, like you mentioned before, there's gonna be flexibility for choosing different things if we don't like what they're proposing.
Diana, go ahead.
That raises a question for me. So are we using a company that's then outsourcing from different designers, or are we going to one furniture provider? So is this an agreement with a furniture provider or with a organization that will then go and get the furniture from other designers?
It's both. It's a team here. This has got KPM Hogg and Knoll. And so there's really 3 companies, but the contract would be with KPM Hogg. And Knoll will provide a lot of the furniture. They're in San Francisco, but other things that they don't have, KPM Hogg's going to go to other vendors to get it.
Are they acting as an interior decorator in this case, or a merchandiser for us? What is their role there? Are they're committed to that one company, but they can get other companies?
Correct. Most of their stuff's going to come from Knoll. And yeah, I think that's what it is there. And all these other companies that are currently on the screen, those are companies they work with. So if there's something that Knoll it currently has in their plans, you know, the bid sheet that's in their attachment, if we don't like that, then we can say we want to get something from one of the other companies that they work with.
Okay, I have a question. So KBM Hogue is the like coordinator, is Knoll Inc. Knoll Inc. is the brand of furniture, which he's showing us right here. Just like the other one, Hayworth Furniture is a designer, is like Herman Miller, you know, office furniture, or what's the other? So I think basically I have a problem with the look and feel of the furniture. And if KBM Hogue and Knoll Inc. are only going to look all the furniture that they spec is going to look just like that, I don't want to sign a
So they're actually, I would call them more of a furniture broker than a specific vendor.
KBM Hogue is.
KBM Hogue, right.
Right.
So they sell all of those brands that are on the screen. So if we're going to talk about a total restyle of the entire town center stuff, that's going to take a little bit more time to do. And I think I would suggest we sit down with WRNS and do that and not execute the furniture thing, but we're going to run into a time crunch for sure.
Well,
If we're talking about the public spaces furniture, like the lobby chairs and the council seating chairs and the benches and the public spaces and such, and you don't like the look and feel of those, that's why I'm suggesting there be a subcommittee of the city council that assists staff in changing those out.
you know, George, they can't be completely different styles, you know, throughout that. You can't have one look in your office and another in the public spaces necessarily.
Well, Mayor, I can tell you that everything that the staff picked, that's what's in this bid document. The public space was picked by WRNS. And again, we could, if you don't like it, the subcommittee or whatever doesn't like, we can change that. But the staff, through PD, everybody picked their own stuff, and that's what the bids came back with.
And there's certain types of furniture you need in the dispatch center for the dispatch desks versus the reception desks and things like that. And plan check counters and you know, layout areas back in the back office spaces and the file cabinets back in the back office spaces. Those are totally different than what's in your public space environment.
So Diana has her hand up.
Yeah, I actually have a question. When you're buying furniture for public space, and I haven't done this in many years, but when I did do it, there were a whole bunch of requirements in terms of flammability and all sorts of legal issues involved in the type of furniture that you buy and put in a public space. Who's reassuring us that we are complying with all that? Is it the firm
WRNS.
we contract with?
WRNS.
WRNS, there are experts on this field to make sure, you know, all the COVID stuff now too, that the materials got to be washable, cleanable, and all that kind of stuff, and wearable, whatever it is. And yeah, and so that's been very well vetted between WRNS and this KPM Hog, who I agree with George, is more like a wholesaler here.
I don't know. It just looks very flimsy to me. It doesn't look like it's going to hold up. I think, you know, somebody's going to sit in it and it's going to break.
I got very good guarantees and warranty. I mean, and we could, again, do a site tour to the warehouse or have them bring stuff in and we can look at it. If we don't like it, we'll just tell them that. We'll get something else. We'll have them provide some other options.
I don't know. Anybody else have an opinion on this? I don't want to be really
No, I do.
unreasonable. Bill?
If I could. Yeah, I looked through every one of those pieces of furniture that was listed in the back. And honestly, Marty, I wasn't crazy about any of them. And, you know, I could live with some of them, like the tables in the lunchrooms and things like that. Sure, some of that is utilitarian and that's how it should be. But like the manager's closed off manager's desk, I didn't think they looked very good. And I've got some concerns with regards to signing a contract that includes providing the furniture, and we haven't picked the furniture, or we're not happy with what's been selected.
Well, again, as I mentioned, staff has selected all their furniture that are in those bid documents, and that's the bids we got from those two vendors. So we met with every staff person from PD, Public Works, Building, Planning, everybody, the administration, George's office, and they're the ones that picked their own furniture. It's not us or WNS picked it. We gave them this catalog and say, let us know what you want, and that's what they picked. Now, the public space stuff, that was identified by WRNS, but everything else was picked by town staff.
Well, who from the council picked the council chambers?
Anthony.
Anthony is not on the council.
Well, he's the city clerk. I mean, so again.
Marty, hang on a second. That's why we're suggesting that there be a council subcommittee that assists with selecting that furniture. It's a whole process. We're not going to sit down with the whole council and have you all go through a catalog. We're going to bring things in or have a subcommittee assist us timing wise.
Well, I agree that the mayor should have done that.
So I'm okay. It's getting we need to move on to the next item. I am not ready to sign this contract right here, right now, with this furniture that's spec. I'd like to form a subcommittee. I'll do that before the week is over, and we'll get with the subcommittee and WRNS, and we'll see where we are. Maybe we'll get a better feel for what it is that we're going to be buying. I think that there's at least 3 of us that feel pretty uneasy about what has been presented to us. And I know that your back's against the wall, timing wise. I'm sorry. I don't want to feel pushed into making this decision right now.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I'd like to make sure that we don't delay. I agree with you, by the way, and I want everybody to be happy with the quality of what we get, obviously. I'd also like us to keep in mind the timeline and see if we can be as aggressive as we can
Of
to
course.
come close to meeting that. So
Of course.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So with that, should we go on to the next item, the encryption?
Yes.
Rick?
No, let's go on to the next item.
Okay, all right.
Hey, I'm ready. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So on
Yes.
encryption, in October 2020, the state of California Department of Justice and the FBI notified all law enforcement in California of the requirement to encrypt radio equipment to ensure the protection of personal identification information, and also information that is relayed via the California Law Enforcement Criminal Telecommunications System, or what they call CLETS. And just to give you an example, all the current radio equipment that we have does not have the ability to be encrypted. And to give you just a sense of how that works, when an officer makes a traffic stop or a contact, takes their driver's license, runs their information over the radio communications equipment, that's the personal protective identification equipment, the dispatcher then utilizes the CLETS telecommunications system that's administered by the FBI. Every state has a version of CLETS. That return information is restricted to law enforcement only. And that's the rationale for the encryption, to ensure that it is protected. They've allowed us to put in a stopgap plan, and we worked with our fellow chiefs in the county and patterned our plan after the highway patrol plan. And it involves a series of ways that we're dispatching information in an attempt to break it up over the airways in case somebody is listening via a police scanner. That's only a stopgap. There is no real way or option 1, 2, or 3. The only way to accomplish this project is for radio encryption. One option that does exist for the CLETS information that's relayed would be the opportunity or the possibility to relay it via cell phone or in-car computer to the officers. But the way that we operate, it's not practical, especially if you're standing outside your car with a suspect to have to go back to the car to look at the information, or your cell phone, which compromises safety. Sometimes it's so fluid that we rely heavily on our communications system. So the recommendation that we have is twofold. The timing is good. I know the cost isn't good, but the timing is good that we caught it before installation of the new dispatch center. That's where the $120,000 increase is, to install the equipment there, do the rework at remote sites that will allow encryption down the road. And then incrementally, because it's another about 120,000, to convert all of our in-car radios and handheld radios to be able to handle encryption. And when we do this, the way that we'll do it is there'll be dual band radios, digital with the ability to go into encryption, because once we have all of our encryption equipment, and then we can then activate the encryption. And I think one thing that's important, I'm sure you saw a lot of the negative press in Palo Alto and around the area. Those pieces of news journalism were very inflammatory. They made it sound like Palo Alto had a choice. I think they maybe didn't communicate it correctly, but what needs to be understood is we have no choice in the matter. Believe me, we don't want to spend $250,000. San Mateo PD is looking at over $1 million, but it's a requirement that we have to do. And my recommendation to George and our response back to California DOJ was that we would be in compliance by 2023. And I'll stop there and take any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any council member have a question right now for this matter?
Yeah, I have just a quick
Yes,
question.
Bill?
Chief, do you have the schedule for the county and for all the other neighboring communities? Because sometimes we need to communicate with them, both for mutual aid, but also, like, for example, in the case where you were doing the running down the car, it went from one jurisdiction to another. So, we can't be in one encrypted mode and they can't, and they're not. So do you have that schedule?
There is a plan for that. I'm not aware of any other agency in San Mateo that has the ability to go to encryption yet. But that's where the importance of the dual band radios comes into play. Should there be a mutual aid request to go to San Mateo, the encryption can be turned off. And then we also have secondary channels already that are countywide with all agencies to go to if we need to in an emergency. And obviously, if there is an emergency and we're not strictly complying with the encryption, that's just something that's got to be done at the time. But encryption can be turned off and on for mutual aid purposes. But it's probably most important to understand we already have a channel called the green channel that we can all move to and communicate on that.
But when the order came from the federal government that we needed to make a change, didn't it have a deadline that we need to be encrypted by such and such a date?
The deadline was to be in compliance by December 31st of last year, or have a plan in place that's been accepted by Cal DOJ. And we turned in our plan and our memo about the middle of December.
But we don't know what the other jurisdictions have done.
We don't know what the timelines are going to be. Every jurisdiction is probably going to be different.
Okay, anybody else have a question?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So, and I understand, Chief, that we have to do this. Having said that, if I understand this properly, there's sort of two competing, I'll call them civil liberties issues. One is the privacy of individuals, and the other is the transparency of police operations. And if we go through this, how will the press or others keep track of how the Atherton police are doing? Do they have adequate ways of making sure that they're on top of our actions? Because they're losing something when they can't just listen to the radio, right?
There is an element of that, and believe me, it's not designed to reduce police transparency, especially right now in the times that we're dealing with. But how we would deal with that and the information that other agencies have put out is through our news flashes, daily bulletins going out for certain events, not everything that we do, but anything of note that we usually do put out already on a news flash. And some agencies post their daily blotters or their daily bulletins for the media to look at.
Are you considering doing anything in addition as we move to this, or just all the things we're already doing?
Pretty much all the things that we're doing, because it's going to be not till 2023 that, or earlier, when we get the equipment, that we're able to throw the switch to encryption. So by then, I think most journalists in the area, news media, will be getting used to it. I know that's a concern that they can't monitor, but we work closely with the Almanac and the Post because we want to get our information out as well. And so we are putting out newsworthy information.
Okay.
Any other council member?
I'd like to ask a few questions, and forgive me if they're naive. Is the encryption, the actual encryption, done in the cloud? And is that being provided for us? And is that, I assume that the encryption would change over time? And is that something that's standardized and provided by the state or on the national level? And what is the equipment that we're adding for encryption? Are you just talking about that's in the city hall? Are we talking about racks of hardware, or is it done in the cloud? I just,
Yeah, that's a good question. It has nothing to do with the cloud because we're talking with an actual radio signal, a digital radio signal. So the equipment that we're actually be installing in dispatch now is the consoles that they use to communicate with our officers and cars in the field, and also our remote sites where we have radio repeaters that take the signal at a remote area, amplify it, and then rebroadcast that, which will be done encryption when we have that ability. And then the other pieces of equipment are the in-car radios and the portable radios. And it is frustrating that I think there was a question, can ours be updated or adjusted so they could accept encryption? And unfortunately they can't, because we have to move to a dual band radio that can do regular and encrypted communications.
So if I could just interject there, because I used to build encrypted radios for the Army and the Marine Corps, and I've competed with Harris. The encryption generally is in a chip that's in both of the devices, and it would have its own code that would be set by, maybe a day of time, day and time of day. So there has to be a key that everybody was on the same encryption. But the encryption is in a chip that's going to be in each and every one of the radio systems.
Okay. Are there any members of the public out there that want to ask Chief McCauley a question about this?
I don't have any, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony. So bringing it back, I honestly don't have a good grasp about this. So it does seem odd that if the DOJ has given us a deadline of December 31st, 2020, and it would give everybody that same deadline. So what is the City of Menlo Park Police doing? What is the Sheriff's Office doing? I would just imagine there's this ginormous scramble to try to do this, or
And why are we only getting this now?
I can tell you well, we're getting it now because we were advised October 2020. And I can tell you what the majority of agencies in this county are doing. The very same thing that we have done is responded to DOJ saying, our plan is to be in compliance. A lot of agencies are citing the same year I have, 2023, so we can integrate them over a couple years. And then they've allowed us to respond with our temporary plan to try to protect the personal identification information and try to protect information that's relayed by CLETS via a new dispatching system. It's not a heavy lift for us. We've already implemented it in the last 2 weeks. And that's how we're all responding. It's an unfunded mandate. The lobbyist for Cal Chiefs is working on that because it is a heavy lift. You imagine the cost for the Highway Patrol with the 5,000 officers that they have.
yeah. Councilmember Widmer, you have a comment?
Yeah, is it necessary that we have to go through TEA for that? Because they're going to be buying it from Harris based on the attachment that you included. And then they're going to mark it up. And so do we really need them to do that? Or can we just get something directly from Harris, and then Harris might have to give us some consulting or professional services support to help you learn how to use it?
TEA is our vendor, and beyond that, I'm not sure exactly how that works.
We would have to have this publicly bid if we were going with a different supplier, and that would take 30, 60 days. And we already have TEA as a vendor who's doing our install of the system. So rather than pull in a whole nother operator to come in and merge with TEA, they're putting in the basic system now. And so I get what you're saying about the potential markup and all of that, but TEA is the one who's doing the actual install. We're already paying for that.
So it seems that because we are under construction, that we have an opportunity to kind of make a smooth transition with a new system installing without having to go in and retrofit stuff.
Correct.
Or is that,
That's correct.
Can I ask a question? Has there been any, if all the other cities and all the other people have to comply with this, is there any purchase plans to do group purchasing so we're getting a discount of some sort?
you would think, but I don't think that cities.
I'm not aware of that because different cities use different equipment. Our equipment that we use is Kenwood. A lot of you use Motorola. There hasn't been that discussion on the chief's level yet.
Who would be
We
authorized
also,
to have that?
we also missed the timing of this window.
Well, but if they just told us in October,
That's ridiculous.
I don't feel any urgency to comply with that notice. That's totally unreasonable. We're
Yeah.
finding out about it in January and supposedly there was a December deadline. That's completely unreasonable.
The
Right.
window, though, is we are installing new communications equipment within the dispatch center. That's required to be done. We don't want to have to pay for that now and then come back and have to pay for it again in order to encrypt it. That's
Yeah,
the
that's
window.
my,
I'm talking
that's my point about the construction. We're kind of in a unique situation here.
I agree. Can I also mention, Rick, that I brought this up at our meeting in December, I believe, and asked the chief to brief us about it.
Yes.
So, and just to be clear, we are in compliance now, giving a timeline for full compliance by 2023.
Well, it sounds like your strategy is good in terms of the two-channel possibility and managing what's encrypted and what's not. My biggest concern is you get this government mandate, and this is an area of technology that is changing extremely rapidly. So it just is, it's a problem.
So do I have any recommendations from any council member? I mean, what they're wanting us to do is to approve this purchase order and, with the amount to be $409,747.
So, Madam Mayor, I have a sort of
That's
comment
correct.
before we get there, which is
Sure.
relates to what I was talking about with the transparency, which I think is a big deal. We had a lot of unrest this summer with, not in Atherton, by the way, and the Atherton police are wonderful, and I am not in any way talking about that.
Right.
But there's a lot of unrest in the summer about police practices, and I think it's really important that we be transparent. And everything the chief described are things that, in the future, we will be, curating before we give out to the press or anybody who asks. What they're losing is sort of the access to a raw data feed that they can follow and keep up. I'd love to see us think about ways to address that. I don't have a specific suggestion, but I'd love to, ask the chief and the city manager to think about ways to address that. 'Cause I think it's important for citizens and the press to be able to get, as much raw information as they can possibly get and not count on us to provide it.
I don't disagree with that, and that's a good comment, but I think what's equally or even more so important is that we are protecting people's private information.
I'm sorry, Chief, to interrupt. I agree with you completely, but let's segregate those issues because the encryption is going to take care of that, right? So now what's left is this issue of transparency, right?
Well, can you have it both ways? And I guess my other question about what is really the amount of money that we would be saving by pulling the trigger right now so that it can be installed in our new construction. Otherwise, if it's really just a chip and maybe a box that gets put in a rack in dispatch or wherever, maybe it's not that big of a deal.
I'm sorry, but we just don't have that sort of information, nor do we have the time window to try and do that after the fact examination. This is an increase of 119,000 for this particular contract. So the 409 is with that increase. And it's just the window to put it in now. It's a chipset probably for the radios themselves, but for the dispatch center, it's probably a lot larger than that.
Cabling and wiring.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff to go along with it. It's a whole new dispatch system
So this 119,000 is an increase in the town center budget.
Yes, it's an increase in the town center communications budget for the police department.
So if they're going to be working at the, like, in putting this in the dispatch communication systems, I think we should do it.
And this comes out of the contingency.
Yes.
Yeah, better do
Okay.
it now.
Yeah, I don't see, is there any issue, any other alternative? Is there, if we waited another year, it'd be a lot more expensive than it would be to do now?
Could
Well, that's
potentially
what I
be.
was asking.
We just don't know.
Let's do it now.
I actually was serious, though. I would like to have the chief or the city manager, someone get back to us with a plan to address this issue of transparency, to see if there's anything we can do to
I think that's
improve
important.
transparency for our citizens.
That's a very good point, and they should, but I think we should go ahead and call for a motion to approve this expenditure.
Is there more than one vendor asked for prices?
TEA is our current vendor for the installation of the system. So no, we didn't go out to bid again. We'd have to go out to full bid again in order to do that.
Do you think that there is significant to be gained by doing that in terms of
not.
finding other vendors who
No.
might?
I do not.
Not in a public setting, Diana. It's really tedious.
Not at this time.
And the time pressure is
And
such that
at time, yeah, I know.
Well, and the other thing is we've already set aside the budget.
Yeah.
It's just part of a contingency.
Right.
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and we approve the amendment to the TEA contract, adding $119,667 to it, authorizing the attorney and the city manager to execute such agreement.
Okay, there's a motion.
Seconding,
Anybody
could I ask for an amendment to that?
Okay,
Again,
yes.
Going back to my point about getting a report back from staff about ways to address any loss of transparency for the media and citizens in
I
this
support
process.
that. I support
Okay.
that, Mike.
Good amendment. And so, Mike, you seconded it with that
I'm gonna
amendment?
second it. Yep.
Okay. Motion's made, second with the amendment. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hawkins,
Yes.
Councilmember DeGolia,
Yes.
Widmer,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lemprus,
Aye.
and Mayor Lewis.
Yes, motion passes. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Good enough.
May I make one last comment?
Well, wait a
Uh,
minute. Yes,
Mayor?
well, hold on. Do we have any council reports? Are you going to make a comment?
It's a comment about something that's going on in town right now, and it's important. People aren't recognizing it.
Okay, Mr. Widmer.
Okay, everybody last week got a hanger on their trash cans, carts, saying, please leave your carts out until at least 6 o'clock on the day of pickup so that they may be changed. And driving around some of the routes, I'm noticing most people, as soon as they're done, their gardeners have taken or the maids have taken the carts in. So they're not getting changed, and it's going to be a problem. So we should all pay attention to that and perhaps communicate that. Maybe, George, you could send something out to remind people, but it's already Wednesday, and so there's only 2 more days. It all was starting on the week of the 18th.
Well, Bill, to that end, everyone on my block left their cans out and none of them got replaced.
Okay, then we should probably also comment to not only Recology. Recology is doing the pickup of the old cans. Green Waste is putting down the new cans. So we should probably touch base with Green Waste.
Yeah, well, part of the problem then maybe is Recology couldn't pick up all the cans because Green Waste failed to dump the recycling cans.
They're actually using the same vendor for picking up the cans as they are for dropping off the new cans.
Okay.
And their transition process allows for this to continue through mid-February. So if they missed cans because people brought them back, they'll pick them up on the next cycle as they go through. But it is good to send out that reminder to folks to make sure they leave them out.
Well, the hangers were specific about this week, but that's fine. We can just. keep-
Nobody, I have 7 cans out there and they left one hanger on one can.
Yeah, that's right.
There
Same.
was not a hanger on every can.
Can someone just tell me what I'm supposed to do? And I will tell other
Just
people as
leave
well.
them
what
out.
I'm supposed to do.
Leave your cans out there,
Leave your
Michael.
cans out till 6 p.m.
So we have a Wednesday morning pickup, roll it out Tuesday night, leave it out till Wednesday night, 6 p.m.
Correct.
Well, that was yesterday. That was last night.
I missed it.
Hey, we'll do it
You
next
didn't
week.
read your hanger.
I didn't read my hanger. I'm sorry.
Do it next week.
Oh my
That-
gosh.
Bill's raising a good
Government
point
work.
though, because I'm probably pretty typical.
Well, the
You
other thing is you
are.
have to switch to the new vendor if you have auto pay. And I've not seen anywhere where what the deadline is for switching. And there was and you had to get the code in order to start your new account. You had to get the code in the letter. And those rolled out over time. Not everyone got it because I asked George about it when I tried to do it. I hadn't got my letter yet. I just got my letter. So there's a lot of confusion around that as well as switching your account to pay for the new vendor.
Right. Forgot about that.
Well,
there
you're
maybe
paying for a quarter, so it doesn't matter. You just pay late.
Right. Okay. Well, sorry the meeting went so long.
Well, if you end it now, you'll make it in less than 3 hours of the regular meeting.
It's 10 to 10. Okay.
Listen to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all.
All right,
Good
thank you
night.
very much.
Good night, Diana.
Good night, all.
Good night. Good night, Anthony and Rick,
Good night.
Bill, Mike,
Good night.
George,
Elizabeth.
Marty. Sorry, Marty.